Hi, geeks. I think it's time we had another one of our long, geeky chats. Don't you? Howdy. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, senior editor for Creative Screenwriting Magazine, and yes, I'm very pleased to tell you that we're going to have a long chat today about Watchmen with co-writers David Hayter and Alex Say. Watchmen has always had a special place in my heart. I've read it about 6 times during my life. I absolutely love it. If you haven't ever read Watchmen, I highly recommend you put it on your list, like the top of your list, because reading Watchmen is a truly sublime experience. Which is why it was so great to geek out with Alex and David for about half the runtime of this 2 hour and 41-minute film, and even with a Q&A that long, I still didn't get to ask all of my questions. Because look, at the end of the day, there were a few folks in this audience who hadn't had dinner, and they had just sat through a 2 hour and 41-minute film, and then a Q&A that was going over 90 minutes, and these folks basically wanted to kill me. And were shooting me looks of death after each new question I'd ask, so I really kind of had to stop at a certain point, and well... All right, maybe it was me who was hungry and there were no angry folks in the audience, but nonetheless, I worked my tail off to make this screening happen. And I really appreciated David Hayter and Alex Say for being so generous with their time and coming down to hang out with us. If you'd like to read the cover story I wrote for Watchmen, which has a really cool cover design, I must say, that I'm quite proud of, along with an excellent article about the long history of bringing Watchmen to the screen, written by Peter Clines, don't forget to look for the March-April 2009 issue of Creative Screenwriting Magazine at newsstands and in Barnes & Noble and Borders bookshops in the United States, Canada, the UK, Western Europe, and of course, Australia. Or you could pop on over to www.creativescreenwriting.com anytime you want to order this as a back issue, or have a look at what's in our latest issue. But let's pause a moment to talk about swag. See, at my screenings, when people get trivia questions correct, I give them free posters that the screenwriters are then cool enough to sign afterwards, and guess what? Here's your chance as a podcast listener to get some cool swag. No, not a poster, calm down. But how's about a free audiobook? That's right, you could choose one of 40,000 different audiobooks as a free digital download by using the following link. Ready? Here it is. www.audiblepodcast.com/screenwrite. Once again, that's www.audiblepodcast.com/screenwrite. And screenwrite is spelled SCREENWRITE. Anyhow, after using that special link, all you got to do is sign up for a 14-day free trial membership to the Audible Listener Gold Monthly Plan, and then you'll be able to test drive the site by downloading a free audiobook of your choice. There's no scam here, because the cool part is that even if you decide to cancel the plan within your free 14-day trial period, the audiobook you download is still yours to keep for free. So use the link I just gave you, browse through over 40,000 audiobooks that you can listen to on your iPod or portable listening device, and if the library is too large to choose from, feel free to consider one of these screenwriting gems. How's about Joe Esterhaus's tell-all memoir, Hollywood Animal, narrated by the always amazing writer and actor Eric Bogosian, or Michael Haig's Screenwriting for Hollywood, or of course the most obvious choice for your free audiobook, Robert McKee's Story, narrated by Robert McKee for a full 6 hours. I'm joking, of course, because we all know the correct runtime is 6 hours and 12 minutes, and I'm not joking. Or, if you're looking for some good fiction to listen to, easy choices, in my opinion, would be Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five, narrated by Ethan Hawke, and man, I love that book. Or, of course, Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep would kind of be the geeky choice. Honestly, if you're a Blade Runner fan who hasn't read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and it's been on your geek to-do list forever, well, now I've just given you the chance to listen to the book on tape or digital download. I guess we don't use tapes anymore. For free. So remember, kids, 14-day free trial, you get to download one free book, which you could keep even if you cancel your trial membership during the 14-day period. Once again, the link is www.audiblepodcast.com/screenwrite. Audible is spelled AUDIBLE, screenwrite SCREENWRITE. And on the off chance, after your free book, you're still looking for more things to do and want to hear more Watchmen chatter, make sure to catch this week's Film Spotting podcast with Adam Kempenaar and Maddie Robinson, who will be doing an in-depth review of Watchmen at filmspotting.net. For those of you that don't know about the Film Spotting podcast, it's fresh from the airwaves of Chicago Public Radio, with each week featuring film reviews, interviews, top 5 lists, DVD reviews, and plenty of the entertainingly insightful film talk that keeps you coming back for more. Go to www.filmspotting.net to tune in. I know, so many links. But now, without further ado, let's jump right onto the stage of our packed event, right as I introduced the screenwriters of Watchmen.
It is my absolute honor to introduce the co-writers of this fine film, good old David Hayter and Alex Say. So, as is our tradition, here I have our latest issue of Creative Screenwriting Magazine with the good old Watchmen cover, one for each of you guys. You are our cover story this month.
Thank you.
We always start with breaking in stories. David, you originally moved to LA to become an actor, right?
You've obviously seen my work.
Yeah.
Your stunned demeanor.
I don't mean it in a bad way, but you started as an actor,
Yeah.
and you starred even in your own 1998 film Burn,
Correct.
which Bryan Singer produced.
Yeah.
Soon after, you decided to go for being Bryan's assistant, right around the time that X-Men was starting. Talk about
Not really.
How
if
soon
you're
after?
thinking of being Brian's assistant, don't do that. Well, what happened was I made this little movie called Burn. I raised $250,000, and Brian, it was a script that Brian had wanted to do after his film Public Access. But Public Access won Sundance, and then he had $7 million, and he made Usual Suspects, which I think was a good move. And he left this little script behind, and I called him up and said, look, I want to do the Burn, which it wasn't called at the time. And he said, oh, well, can I help you out? And I said, sure. So he put his name on it. That helped me raise the money. We made the film, took it to Slamdance, won some awards, traveled around the world, didn't sell the film, and then I was broke. I was a broke film producer, and as far as being an actor, I had put almost 2 years into the film and just... I was kind of at the end of my rope. And
did you finance it with credit cards? Is that what you did?
Other people's credit cards.
All right.
No. Don't finance a movie through credit cards. No, I found stock market guys. I just found there are people out there who will give you, $50,000. I had one guy who was a self-described gray area criminal who he said, well, how much would I have to put in to get a walk-on in the movie? And I said, well, at least $25,000. And he said, okay. I was like, I said 100. And anyway, so we did.
What was the budget?
It was $217 actually is what we spent. So I raised a pretty good amount of money, and we made a neat little film which will probably finally get released this year. But then I was broke, and I just needed a job, and I was sort of that was my lowest point in Hollywood, and I had never considered getting a 9-to-5 job before because I came out here to be an artist of some sort. And again, Brian saved me. He gave me a job answering the phones on X-Men. And do you want to hear the whole story?
Well, yeah, the interesting part of the story, and we're going to get to you in a second, Alex, but the interesting part of the story is you started as an assistant, and by the end of the project, you received sole writing credit on X-Men. So there's a lot of math to do in between there.
Oh, no. That happens all the time. You'd be surprised.
Talk us through that. I mean, I know that Christopher McQuarrie and Ed Solomon had made contributions. Like McQuarrie's was kind of the Magneto Holocaust connection.
That's right, yeah, absolutely.
Talk us through kind of what was going on and how you slowly went from answering phones to clickety-clack on the keyboard.
Well, what happened was I was answering the phones, and then Brian came in one day, and we were friends. I knew Brian for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years at this point, and we had just made this little film together, and he came in and he said, look, my assistant's 19 years old. He doesn't care about the movies. Why don't we, do you want to drive me around to some of the creature effects houses? Because it's really cool, and as a filmmaker, you'll appreciate it. And I said, sure. So I was driving him around, and Brian's always complaining about the script. Always. It doesn't matter what script it is. It's horrible. This is going to ruin my career, and I don't know, my back hurts. And I listened and listened and listened to everybody and all of their problems with what they felt were the problems with the script. And then one day I said, having been an X-Men fan myself and knowing the characters very well, I said, look, why don't you have a scene where Wolverine's walking across the mansion grounds and he runs into Cyclops and they start playing a game of pickup basketball and it turns ugly, and he says this and he says this and he says this, and that'll set you up for everything you want to do down the road. And Brian went, okay, good, yeah, go write that. And to which I thought he was kidding. It was an $80 million movie. I was like, Yeah, right. And then he called me and asked me where his scene was, and I said, "Oh, I'm still working on it." And then I spent the day just working on this 2.5-page scene, just like, honing it and shaping it. And he called me up the next day. I sent it to his house, and I thought, if I get a line in this movie, that would be epic. That would just, I've been waiting for this movie to come out since I was 12 years old. So he called up and said, "Hey, are there any phone calls for me?" And I said, "I don't know. What did you get the scene?" He's like, "Oh, yeah. And I said, "Well, what'd you think?" And he said, "Well, I put it in the movie." And so I was sort of stunned. And then he said, "Okay, here's what I'm going to do. You come with me to the studio meetings to talk about the script meetings and sit in the back and just take notes. Don't say anything, and don't tell anybody you're writing the script." So I said, okay. And so that's what I would do. And I'd go to the studio meetings and I'd listen and listen and listen. And then Brian would start to turn to me and go, "Well, I don't know. Do you think that works?" And I'm like, don't even, I'm not even here. And then one of the producers found out about it, and he asked me to show him a copy of the script with all of my work highlighted. Well, by that point, it was about half the script. And basically, he went to Fox and he told them what was going on, and they were forced to make a deal with me. Otherwise, we'd have to undo all that work, or I could sue them, or whatever. So they gave me a deal. They paid me $35,000, which is the Guild minimum rewrite fee, to which I said, $35,000. That's fantastic. And then they brought me up to Canada, and I worked for another 8 months on the film. And the whole time the studio said, don't even try to get credit on this. You will never get credit on this. Don't even look into the arbitration process. Like, don't even remember that I said there's an arbitration process. And so they, of course, did not submit me for credit. And they submitted Chris McQuarrie and Ed Solomon, usual suspects in Men in Black, a very good, a more likely marquee than no-name phone answer guy. And I called Chris, who is also a friend of mine, and said, "Look, can you just sort of look at what I've done and see if you think it's worth it to include my name? If I could share credit with you and Ed Solomon, it would change my whole life." And he said, "Yeah, well, have you spoken to Ed?" I said, "No, I don't know Ed Solomon." And he said, "Look, Ed's really nice. I'll call him up." And they both wrote in to the arbitration committee and said, "This is David Hayter's screenplay. He's the architect of this screenplay." And I ended up getting sole credit, and the movie opened to a scant $54 million, and suddenly I was a screenwriter.
It's a hell of a story, and that movie actually kicked off basically the current trend in comic book movie, adaptations. So kudos to you for that.
Well, thank you. Well, thanks. Yeah, for good or ill. We kind of proved that something beyond the big three, Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, could work on a big scale, and it sort of kicked it off, which is why I was pursuing this so hard, because I thought this would kill it all for everybody.
Alex, getting to you, X-Men only made $54 million, but you, sir, your first produced script was Watchmen, which made $55 million. You beat David's previous by a mil.
No, that doesn't count, because my first produced script was at Showtime, which made nothing. So.
Thank God.
True. Sorry, I meant
thank God, because I'll tell you why.
Feature film script. Feature film script. Is what I meant.
Fair enough.
Okay, because you're killing me. Because I am. Maybe now I'm not, but I was, with X-Men, the most successful first-time screenwriter of all time. That was my first writing job.
You just got beat.
X-Men. And I just got beat.
You just got beat. Alex,
and I supported him for credit. God, I know.
Alex, talk about your breaking in story. To my knowledge, as you told me in the article for the magazine, you started as a temp at Disney.
Yeah, I was a temp. I temped all over the place, so I was kind of switching back between temping, and I was also producing like low-budget independent hip-hop videos. And then it got to a point where Disney was like, "Okay, we're not going to keep paying you overtime. You have to take a job here, or you can't work here anymore." But in the middle of all that, one of my friends was an assistant, and he got a promotion somewhere else, and he told his boss that I was a good writer, and I ended up temping for his boss, and his boss said, "Let me read something you've written," and I gave him something I wrote, and he helped pass it along to a manager who I'm still with to this day, and kind of probably a year after that, I got my first paid writing gig.
What was the script that they passed around?
It was called 87 Fleer. Warner Brothers controls it now. Nothing's really happening with it.
So it did eventually get set up?
Yeah, it did.
All right.
Miraculously, yeah.
Could you see after the success of Watchmen anything moving forward on it now, years later?
Yeah, I mean, it's really it's a small movie. I'm not sure what Warner's would do with it or if it even fits there. It's small, independent, really movie with a bunch of teenage kids. I'm supposed to direct it, but I don't know if that's really going to happen or not. So we'll see.
Talk about your first produced credit, which wound up on Showtime, as you said. I think it was originally starting as a film, right?
It was started it was a television pilot, and basically Showtime had read the script, 87 Fleer, and they said, okay, we'd like to do a show on gangs. I said, okay. And here's the show on gangs I would do. And I was already kind of working with 40 Acres, Spike Lee's company, so they were going to produce it. It's one of those things, if Spike ended up directing it, if he had committed to direct it from the get-go, they would have ordered 13 episodes. But I think he thought he was going to either do he was holding out to see if he was going to do either Jackie Robinson or Joe Lewis story. Didn't happen. So by the time he came back around and said, okay, I'll direct this thing, there was a regime change. So the project wasn't, just looked at it from a different perspective. And we shot it, had a great experience doing it. And then they didn't want to pick it up as a series, but, they had a 2-hour sort of Spike Lee movie on their hands. So then they kind of wanted to do a mini-series, which was like, okay, fine. And then there were just all these, like, budgetary things. So before, I think they let for some reason, the actors' options expire. And then they were kind of all of a sudden rushing with no deals made to kind of, let's do this miniseries. And then they were like, okay, this was, I think, in March. And they're like, okay, we need 4 more hours by April. We need every script to be 49 pages, no nighttime exteriors. You have to write it hanging from the ceiling with a pen and a legal pad. And, I was like, okay. I was like, all right, fine. I'll do all that. But that never materialized. Then they wanted to bookend it with another 2-hour movie. And it just didn't work for me because I paced it for the length of a marathon, and now you're asking me to sprint the rest of the way. First of all, it didn't really work for me creatively. It wasn't gonna do shit for me professionally. I'd already done shit with Spike Lee, and they were gonna pay me shit. So I was just like, no, thank you.
At what point did you decide to leave your day job? When
I first got that first check. I was
when you got the first check,
yeah.
All right. Good for you, man.
Yeah.
All right. Moving to tonight's film, through 1986 and 1987, there were 12 issues, written by Alan Moore, with art by Dave Gibbons. We know it as The Watchmen. It's the only graphic novel to win the Hugo Award and the only graphic novel to appear on Time Magazine's list of 100 best English language novels, 1923 to present. As Peter Clines reports in our latest issue, Watchmen has had Hollywood trying to make it since it was in galley form. I want to talk about how each of you got involved with the project. For me, actually, this is almost coming full circle because the first interview I ever did for Creative Screenwriting Magazine was with David when he signed a deal with Universal to write and direct Watchmen on September 10th, 2001. And it was an interesting contract because a day later, this comic book about the destruction of part of New York City to ensure world peace seemed like it might never reach the screen. David, talk about that, signing the contract, having that terrible tragedy happen, and then kind of realizing that for a while Watchmen really did need to be put on hold.
Well, I didn't think it needed to be put on hold. I sort of, in a horrified fashion, thought that it had happened in the world, that Alan's sort of vision, especially in those days following, was coming true, that it's hard to remember now, but in those first few days after September 11th, the whole world did rally behind us, and everybody, was it, the French president said, today we are all Americans. And that's the end of Watchmen, and I thought, I thought it made it more timely, and that never stopped the studios from wanting to make it. What stopped them from wanting to make it was my script, and the fact that it was so close to the book. And they were like, "Well, no, we love Watchmen, but we don't want to make Watchmen, and we just like to put the name Watchmen on something and then exploit that fan base. And I said, well, I'm not really interested in that. But what did happen? So my primary years working on the film were from 2000 to 2005, like late 2005. So it was that whole time was very informed by September 11th and by the war on terror, and that's why I had updated it to present day. I mean, that was something the studios did want, and I also felt that was something I could give them, given the fact that our current problems were so much on the forefront of everybody's minds. Now, by the time the movie came out, well, the Russians have rebuilt their country, and we're already fighting with them again, and so it all comes back together. But that's why I had brought it present day.
We're going to get more in depth in the development process in a second. Alex, going to you though, this after David fell off, and we'll get to that later. This became an open writing assignment basically at Warner Brothers.
And it fulfilled the dream. I mean, I just remember sitting in my college dorm, playing Metal Gear and saying, one day I'm going to work with the guy who's the voice of Solid Snake, and it fucking came true.
And it happened.
Yes, so beyond that dream coming true, it became an open writing assignment, and went to Warner Brothers, and I had a really, even though I hadn't a lot of produced credits at that point, I had done a lot of work at Warner Brothers, and they seemed to like me as a writer. So I knew I had at least a chance to get in the room. So I just told my agent, my manager, I'm like, I know everyone and their mother will be going for this. Get me in the room and let me at least have a conversation with these people and see what's going on. I mean, the first conversation is I obviously being such a huge fan of the graphic novel, had been tracking the project and just praying that they weren't going to do League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And when I had my first conversation with Lloyd Levin, it was clear that he was a big fan of the material and wanted it to be true to the graphic novel. And he said, "Well, let me send you one of David's scripts." And when I read it, it was quite obvious that David was a huge fan and he revered the material. And especially reading his ending, I was like, "Okay, this is brilliant. What do I need to do to get this job?" And basically, I just had to keep competing for it, and I did a lot of work. I wrote a 15-page outline of.
Wait, going back for just a second, just getting into that room, being able to meet with co-producer Lloyd Levin. You obviously had a lot of competition. I mean, because there's certain go-to names for writers that always kind of are brought in first for the comic book assignments.
Oh yeah.
I know you did your homework, as you explained to us in the article, that kind of won those guys over. Talk about kind of getting in there up against these A-listers that were, normal picks and kind of shining on your own.
I don't know, but I knew one of the names because it became narrowed down between me and this other dude, and I don't know. Look, I was a huge fan of the material. It was very clear that I knew it, and I just think the willingness to do kind of all this work for free and just having command of the material sort of won them over. I mean, probably my passion for it. I mean, this is one of the ones I just, I literally told my agent, I will fight a motherfucker for this. I said, I was like, no. I'm like, I'm dead serious. I'm like, put me in the gladiator pit. Like, no knives or nothing like that. But I'm like, yeah, whoever
You're
walks out.
not a crazy person.
Yeah, I'm like, whoever walks out gets a job. I'm like, I'm telling you right now, I'm 100% willing to do that. And they were like, oh, okay. So, I think it was I think it was just passion and the hard work, because Larry was the one who was most vocal about it. Like, nah, you did the work. You're my guy. He's like, you're my guy. He just kept saying, you're my guy. And I was like, okay.
As you explained in the magazine, I just want you to talk us through it again. That you wound up on a conference call that was practically a globe-spanning call.
Oh, I don't know. Do you really want to? This is.
It's interesting though, because you did your homework and it showed in that call.
Yeah. Well. I had a meeting with a big meeting with a big producer. We were pitching a project at a studio, and we were with the head of the studio, who was a raving lunatic. I mean, like certifiably insane. And
what studio was that?
And it went on for like 2 hours, and it's just not one of those situations where, because we were trying to set up this movie, and I just couldn't walk out of it, and I was just like, at the 1 hour point, I'm like, oh my god, I need to be in Burbank. I'm like, the fuck is going on? I'm like, I gotta get out. I'm like sweating bullets. I'm like, I don't give a fuck about this job. I give a fuck about the other job. Get me out of here. And it wouldn't. It just kept ticking clock. And then finally, like literally the meeting ended. I like sprinted out of the office. Like, I don't know if they thought I had to go to the bathroom or something. And I got out. I was in my car, and on the phone call, like Lloyd was in London. Larry was, I don't know where the hell Larry was. And then there was, and there was like a bunch of Warner Brothers people in Burbank, and so I was in the middle of my pitch, and like no one could hear me. Like no one could hear me. Everyone would be like, huh? Like every 2 seconds, what? Can you repeat? And I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna kill this person. And then finally Larry, in his infinite wisdom, was like, Alex, he does a much better impression of Larry.
Alex, let me tell you something.
And he was like, I have a feeling you're going off a document. And I was like, yes, I'm going off a document. And he's like, would you have a problem with us looking at that document? Which is, traditionally for writers, you don't do that because sometimes
they'll just take it and make the movie and not pay you.
Well, that or they just sometimes when executives see documents, they become very rigid in your thinking. They don't think they might say, okay, that's just the way it is, and he's not fluid or flexible about anything.
Wait a minute, just sorry to interrupt. Are you guys both against leave behinds in a pitch then for that reason?
I think it just depends.
Okay.
Some of it's good. I mean, I don't know what Dave, but generally I don't. In this situation, I kind of felt like I had no choice because basically the phone call was completely a complete disaster. But for the most part, I would not do that unless I really, really, really had a good relationship with the executive.
David, do you ever do leave behinds?
I don't. But I was lucky enough to start at a level where I didn't have to. I would. I don't know. If you're desperate to get a job and you really want them to see what a great writer you are, then it can't really hurt you to leave behind a document unless you see the movie and then see all your ideas in there, and then there's nothing you can do. I mean, you could try to sue a studio, but that's not as much fun as people.
You could register your document as well with the WGA.
Yes and no, but you're pitching on something they own. So even if you register it,
okay.
It doesn't. If they eventually make the movie, they own it. So, like I've seen my ideas, and I've got ideas in Spider-Man 2. I've got ideas in a bunch of Marvel movies I don't have credit on. And that's fine. I mean, that's sort of out of my enthusiasm, sort of talking about these projects and saying, well, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this, and they'll take your ideas. So if you're okay with that, if you're okay with the idea that they may not hire you and they may take your ideas, leave a leave behind,
All right. Well,
I mean, it could, and maybe down the road, there'll be some assistant who says, oh my God, that was terrible what they did to that writer, and such good ideas. And then that assistant is running the studio 6 months later. They may call you in, and maybe it's good. So it's a judgment call, but don't trust anybody.
Alex, with that pressure, you decided that, as you said, the phone call was going kaput. So
yeah, it was a disaster.
Sending them your design document, your
well, I did have a conversation with my agent and manager beforehand. I said, look, I mean, are we going to do this again, or we talked about it, and he said, no, you know what, in this situation, they thought it was a good idea, and it ended up getting me the job.
Yeah, and I mean, he's going for a major film, so you take the risk. And
tell us what was in that document. How many pages was it?
15, scene by scene, using stuff from the graphic novels, stuff from David's script, and and some of my own stuff, and said, here's how I would do the movie.
So basically a scene-by-scene breakdown.
Literally scene by scene, yeah.
So structure was obviously important in that. Okay.
Oh, yeah, absolutely,
right. Yeah. Cool. For both of you guys, we're going to get into the development process now. Clearly in the comic, there is a comic within the comic known as the Black Freighter. Obviously, the character of Hollis Mason, the first Night Owl in the comic, he wrote a book that we see a little bit of called Under the Hood. Mm-hmm. That's a major piece of the appendices in the comic. Those were always early on the things that were getting cut back and forth. Interestingly, Alex, you managed to, at the last minute, write the Black Freighter as a 30-minute animated DVD companion piece, right? Of the modern age.
Yeah, actually not the last minute. Really, actually, shortly after I'd done my first pass on it, because in the first initial meetings with Zach, Zach was like, we should do Black Freighter on the DVD, not just as an extra on the DVD. And Lloyd was like, yes, we've already kind of discussed that, and yeah, we'd want to do that. So on my own, I just said, oh, here's a Black Freighter script. And they're like, and then Zach was like, awesome, I'll take that.
Yeah, see, Alex is all about Leave Behind. Without Leave Behinds, he wouldn't be here.
Was that the same for Hollis Mason, the behind-the-scenes documentary?
No, that was just Zach. I've not seen anything from it. I saw them doing some stuff of it, so I don't know how much of that is written or how much of that is just Zach running around saying, go say this and go do that. So I never saw a script, or I don't even know if a script actually exists for that. But and then at a certain point when Black Freighter started becoming reality, they were actually talking about doing it, live action with just like 300 with green screen, and then and then when Warner saw the budget for that, they're like, no. And even with the animated one, they had. That was actually part of the reason why I had to expand. They asked me to expand it was because they're like, look, they're not going to spend X amount of, I forgot what the number was, X amount of millions of dollars to do this 15-minute thing. What they might do is actually spend more money, but if you expand it and make it a half an hour, then we can make it a DVD, or maybe we can sell it to Spike TV and recoup some of the costs from that.
I haven't seen it. Do you want to tell us anything about?
I have not seen it either.
Well, on the page, do you want to tell us about how you expanded what was the comic within the comic?
Well, much like in looking at the supplemental material, David looked at some of the unhooded stuff and incorporated that in his in some of the scenes. For me, when they asked me to expand Black Freighter, I just said, okay. Obviously, where the hell did Alan come up with this? And I looked. In that little like the fake wizard type of magazine that's in the thing talking about Black Freighter as if it's a real comic book, the article about it. And then in reading that, they started talking about the Threepenny Opera and all that stuff. And I said, okay, that's clearly he's saying that's where I got it from. So I went and looked about stuff with the Threepenny Opera, and I used some of that. I don't know if that still exists in what's finished, but I used some of that to sort of expand the script. And actually... Oddly enough, probably one of my proudest achievements in this project was that when I did it, I wrote, like in the end credits, because I had started listening to the music, I said in the end credits it should be Nina Simone's Pirate Jenny, who she sings about she's singing about the Black Freighter. She used it as an allegory for civil rights, but it was kind of cool. So I told Zach about it. I wrote it in the script, and then he actually put it on the soundtrack, which was kind of cool.
That's great.
Yeah.
This project has been in development for a long time. David, this is going to kind of hit you a little more because you were there in the early days. The stories you told me, I did not even have enough room to print all of them. I got as much as I could in the magazine. This project went through some of the worst development notes I've heard. I want
me too.
Yeah, I want you to talk us through some of it. Some of the early stuff. You kind of had to concoct your own set of rules, as you explained to me, about what your limits were with characters, flashbacks, etc. So talk about some of the stupid notes that you were getting and how you handled those.
Well, the notes were remarkably uniform from studio to studio. I had it at Universal and Revolution and Paramount, and I guess the notes were very similar at Warner Brothers too. They wanted to cut all the flashbacks. They didn't know why there had to be 6 characters. Could it just be about one character, or could it be a buddy movie between Dan and Rorschach, or what? And I don't know what else. Can't the blue guy wear pants? Why does he have to wear no pants? And I'm like, well, because he gets beyond pants. Can't you? It's art. And they. Basically,
it's tough to navigate.
I don't know that there was anything egregiously stupid or horrifying. I mean, it was all stupid and horrifying, but it was really just an effort to make it Batman, or to make it, a standard comic book movie that they could wrap their heads around. I mean, this is the real conundrum of writing big movies. You have to break the mold, and you have to give people something they have not seen before. That's sort of your primary goal. And yet, if the studio can't envision it in the framework of something they've already seen before, they won't make it. So you have to sort of balance that out. So So I understood where they were coming from, and I sort of knew where they'd be coming from when I stepped into each role. But what I did was, the only set of rules I had were what if I was a gigantic Watchmen fan, which fortunately I was, and what would I kill me over for changing, and anything that I think I would kill myself over, don't do that. And so they'd say, can you cut it down to one character? I was like, well, no. And can you cut all the flashbacks? And I'd say, this is a story about 40 years of history. It's not like when we did X-Men, I went out and I read comic book after comic book and looked back through 35 years of history, of 35 years of stories, and pulled lines of dialogue and sequences and things, and sort of crafted a tale that sort of carried them all through. This is different in that these characters do not exist outside of the framework of these events. They all go together, and just them on their own, I don't think is that interesting. I mean, Rorschach is always an interesting character. Dr. Manhattan is always an interesting character. But what makes Watchmen great is the fact that you bring these two characters and their unstoppable ideologies into conflict with each other, and then you've got a worthwhile story. So what it came down to was sort of a bartering match between myself and the studios. How far could they push me, and what could I give them what could I change that would make them feel like they were having an impact on the movie but wouldn't ruin the movie? So
usually at this point is about when the writer's fired, when they won't make those changes.
That's right.
But you had protection, which we wrote about. Talk about that.
Well, for anybody who is bagging on Larry Gordon for any reason, he has stuck with this movie this entire time, and the only reason that it ended up so close to the book is because Larry has a pretty remarkable deal in Hollywood, which says if for any reason we're not agreeing creatively, we can walk. And nobody has that. Nobody has that.
They could walk and take their intellectual property with them.
That's right.
It would not be in turnaround.
That's exactly right. It's not in turnaround. He just takes it back and says, okay, well, thank you very much, and off we go. And so every time they would fire me, instead of Larry saying, okay, well, we'll get somebody else in, he'd walk, and he'd take the film, and we'd go together to another studio. And it was eventually me who walked away after Paramount, because we got very close to production on that with Paul Greengrass, and when that fell apart, again, there was a regime change at the studio. They killed the movie, and that really broke my spirit. And I said, I don't think I can keep doing this. And so I sort of walked away. Unfortunately, it was Alex who stepped in, not some jerk. I'm sorry, some jerk I didn't know.
Oh, yes. Alex, according to an interview Zach did that was published on io9.com, even at Warner Brothers, the studio wanted to cut things like the comedian's funeral, the trip to Mars because they say nothing happens on Mars, or the backstory of Rorschach.
Absolutely, yes.
What were some of the insane things that you were kind of hearing, when the project's finally getting momentum, it's about to be lost yet again?
Well, first of all, let me say this. Just to go off on what David said, I don't think that Larry Gordon and Lloyd Levin and David Hayter get enough credit for having to protect this piece of material for all these years from the powers that be. I mean, I feel kind of like I feel a little messed up a little bit sometimes because I even though I was on the project slightly before Zach was, it wouldn't matter. The writer doesn't matter. I mean, the producers don't kind of really matter. It's only a filmmaker that's going to be able to, a filmmaker with leverage that's going to come in and walk in and say, guess what, we're setting this rated R. Guess what, we're setting it at 1985. I could sit there and talk about that all day, and it would fall on deaf ears. So really, when we're talking about getting stupid notes, Zach is the hammer on that. I mean, I got a little, some of them in the beginning when I got hired, and you kind of dance around it a little bit, and you kind of try to, use some verbal trickery and like, oh, but if I do this, then this is okay, and then it's like, oh, okay, But yes, there would be on the Mars thing. I think there was an issue with in the script wise, but then really when they started to like budget it out, production person goes in. Mars, $500,000. And it was like, yeah, so $500,000, you know what I'm saying?
$500,000, and it's one of the greatest pieces of literature on the face of the planet.
Yeah, so there was stuff like that. There was stuff like, why? I hate Dan. He's such a loser. And it's like, yeah, that's the point. You know what I'm saying? Yes. And you should feel that way, and you should be, and that's the whole point. In this whole movie, you're watching him, and even if you're getting frustrated with his impotence, that you see his transformation. You know what I mean? That is the whole point of it. He's not fucking Bruce Wayne. You know what I mean? And it's going off on.
He couldn't.
Yeah, and it's going off what. It's going off what David was saying is that they try to formulate it into something familiar. It's like, okay, if you want to make Justice League, go make Justice League. You own it. Go make it. You know what I mean? This is something much more different. Why would you, if you're just taking the idea of a bunch of superheroes banding together to solve a mystery, you can make your own movie. You don't have to abuse Watchmen to kind of formulate it into something else, Be like, oh, well, how come Dr. Manhattan's the only one that has powers? Like stuff like that. You're just like, because he's the only one that has powers. That's why, I mean, it's just, and that was the effort, and it's, even when we got to the point where it's like, okay, they keep coming up with these notes, it would just be Zach that would come in and be like, listen, it's not happening. You know what I mean? I just made you $500 million, you know what I'm saying? You want me to do the movie? And that's that,
He was using all the credit of 300 basically.
Well, I don't think I'm not.
Well, no, he was to push through Watchmen.
I don't think he's walking in going, "Hey, I made you $500 million."
No.
It was just.
I didn't think that was a direct quote. Sorry, but he was using the cachet of just coming off one of their more successful projects.
Yeah, it gave him a lot of leverage. It gave him tremendous creative currency. It would. Let me just tell you this: without that, it's not set in 1985, and it's not rated R.
Yeah.
No.
And it doesn't exist.
And it doesn't exist, right.
Yeah.
Talk about when you guys came on, just your process of how long it took you to write. David, when you came on, a lot of what you did was of course writing, but it was also fine editing. I mean, this is 12 comics, one story. A lot needed to be taken out. Talk about how long it took you to get your first draft cooking. And the editorial things that you were considering.
I don't know, 2 weeks. No, seriously, what I did was I took the book. They asked me, Larry Gordon asked me if I could turn it into a movie. I had pitched it as a 6-hour miniseries, and he said, David, I don't know anything about TV. Can you turn it into a movie? I said, well, I don't know. I can try. And so I took it. This is the point. This is why I started in 2000. Didn't sign my contract till well into 2001 because it took so long to it takes a long time to make the deal, and it also... We went through this process, and what I did was I just copied the book out verbatim. I opened up Final Draft, wrote the whole thing out, assigned all the lines to their characters, wrote in simple sort of action description, and I went through all the way to the end. And by the time I got to the end, I had 178 pages, which is, much longer than a movie script should be. It should be on average between 100 and 120 pages, but it wasn't crazy long. Like, it wasn't 500 pages. It wasn't the 300-page draft that they say I wrote on Wikipedia or whatever.
Everything on Wikipedia is accurate.
I know. Well, that's how I got my advanced maths degree. Then what I did was I said, okay, now let's go through a process of editing wherein I sort of manipulate time and sort of crunch it down and cut anything that seems extraneous, anything that isn't something I absolutely love, and without losing a single scene, and see how far I get. And then my next pass was 134 pages, which was right about where I felt it should be. That's about 2 hours and 15 minutes worth of movie, and I thought, well, that's where it should be. So it was very easy to write. It was just very difficult to defend, and like you say, what it became was a process of just going through, the studio would hire me, we'd go through some drafts, they'd give me a bunch of notes, I'd do what I could, make passionate arguments for what I couldn't, and then they'd fire me, and then we'd go to the next. And I just figured, well, we'll just keep going and going until we get it done, and that's eventually what happened.
Alex, how long did it take you to do your first draft, and what was your writing process like? Obviously, there was that supercharged kick when Zach did get the studio to agree to take it away from the context that David had updated it to and set it back into 1985 like the comic?
Yeah, I think my first two passes, either my first one or my first two, were still present day. I did do a version where it was still present day, but it was the Cold War, with the idea being that the existence of Dr. Manhattan just further polarized the Soviets and that they just continued to build their nuclear arsenal because they were afraid of this guy. But for Zach, Nixon was really important for him. For the same reason why Vietnam, even when in David's drafts, when he said it in present day, there's no way you could lose Vietnam. You had to show how the existence of these superheroes changed American history and subsequently world history. So you showed that we won the Vietnam War, okay? But there needed to be something else. And we even thought, okay, well, if Nixon could he still be president now? I think he was going to be like 109 or something like that. And it just didn't, then he would have been, I don't know how many, like 8 terms. It just wouldn't have worked that way. And it had to be Nixon. I mean, we talked, was it Reagan? Well, Reagan was a 2-term president, you know what I mean? And now his legs...
You've said that before. I don't understand what... So Nixon was a term and a half president.
No, but Reagan is looked upon with having a certain level of success as a president. Nixon was fucking impeached. True. No, but I'm just saying. No, I mean I'm saying Nixon was impeached. So like to go from being impeached to being a 4-term president, or 5-term president, is a huge difference as opposed to, okay, it's Reagan and maybe some people didn't like him, or even we were like, maybe it's Arnold Schwarzenegger. You know what I'm saying? So we had to. So it was very important for Zach for Nixon to be president, and therefore, when he had the leverage, a lot of the work I did was setting it into 1985.
You told me for the article, one of the musing notes that you did get was an executive said to you, there just doesn't seem to be enough of a ticking clock in this.
Yeah, and then I said, and then I just went ahead and put more scenes with the doomsday clock and say, there's your ticking clock right there. Literally.
And right out of the comic book.
Yeah, and right out of the comic book. I said, there it is.
I absolutely love the opening sequence of the movie. Was that something that you wrote? I know at a certain point that Zach did an uncredited pass on the script. Did it come out of that?
No, you talking McLaughlin Group?
The McLaughlin Group, the opening of the movie, the montage.
Well, the McLaughlin Group I wrote, my first exposure to the McLaughlin Group was watching Saturday Night Live, which has been, I guess, where I seem to, because my first time I ever saw Prime Minister's Questions was on Saturday Night Live, and I'm like, oh my God, I have to watch The Real Thing. And it's like, The Real Thing's actually funnier than Saturday Night Live. So from that, I would occasionally watch the McLaughlin Group, and I said, oh God, this would be a great way to put the McLaughlin Group in and then use it kind of to introduce the audience to this alternate reality that we have there. So that, and then Zach wanted to do the credit sequence. And then we kind of both talked about what would be in the credit sequence. And then we actually wrote the credit sequence, which is like a page or a page and a half. And the studio was like, the fuck is this? Like a page, this script is like way too long. And you spent a page and a half on the credit sequence. So Zach was just like, listen, dude, just put credit sequence. And then that's it. Like one line, credit sequence. And he knew what it would be. And, so the studio wouldn't trip out.
It was great. I mean, because it also got a lot of stuff out of the appendices back into the movie, into the mythology.
Yeah, so. That's the opportunity that I had that David didn't have, because I had the big dog behind me, and if he said I want to use more stuff from the graphic novel, I got to go back and do more stuff from the graphic novel, and David didn't have that opportunity because he didn't have someone like Zach getting his back like that, and that's just the way it exists in Hollywood. You need a filmmaker with leverage to make these kinds of decisions.
What did you guys learn about ensemble writing through this experience? Because, I mean, these are great characters. It's great ensemble writing. You guys were smart enough to take a lead from the page. But, throughout the decades, as we've seen this project's gone through, it's had some trouble even hitting that. I think this has a very, distinct voices for each character is what I mean. Talk about kind of manipulating that to make sure that each character has their own mini arcs, kind of just like in the comic.
Well, it's all in the comic.
Right.
Their voices, their arcs, everything are so far beyond anything I could ever do. I mean, I wrote 2 ensemble movies, X-Men 1 and X2, which had 11 main characters in the first one and 13 main characters in the second one. So if you want to know the difference between what I can do and what Alan Moore can do, you can look at those movies versus this movie. In the X-Men movies, what I did was I just did a character search of all of Cyclops' lines in X-Men and said, okay, let's see everything he says and see what his through line is, what his story is, and how his character changes over time. Okay, let's go through, Wolverine and Rogue and everybody.
That's good. So you do character-specific passes to recheck everyone's arc.
I did on those two movies, but on Watchmen, it's so good. I mean, it's just so brilliant and so original that, I mean, like I say, it's just really, this is more about. I mean, there are things that I did to adapt it. There are things that Alex did to adapt it. There are things we did to make it, I don't know, more appropriate for film or give it a cool sort of film thing. But it was never about sort of changing. If I'm trying to do anything, and I think Alex has said this as well, we're trying to mimic Alan Moore's voice as best we can in a sort of spackling way. It's not like I'm not going to try to build a statue and say, look, Alan Moore did that. I'm just trying to fill in any gaps with my best impression of what Alan's intention was.
We're going to get to what's been debated on the internet for years here, and then we're going to open it up to the crowd soon for questions. The ending. Originally, Vaight's plan relied on a trans-dimensional science experiment gone awry when a huge Lovecraftian alien creature smashes into New York City, killing the creature itself and many others. Since the creature looks like a squid, this is how it became known as the squid ending. It's a moment that it's a moment that makes the superpowers back away from the brink of war. I'm just giving the whole backstory on this because they realize that there's more to the universe than their petty problems, and who knows what other problems will arise from the interdimensional rift that, in essence, also looks to some like an alien attack, as Vaight explains. So the world comes together with sympathy towards New York and an elated feeling of moving forward together as human beings across all borders. Essentially, it's a cold, calculated decision Vaight came up with, wherein the way to avert nuclear annihilation could be attained by, killing tens of thousands of people. Because
did you write that yourself?
I did write this down because the ends justify the means. So it's a wild ending. I've always loved it, but for broad audiences, I've understood that it's a third act left turn because it moves the focus away from the narrative and character momentum of all the story before it with this introduction of this near supernatural force as it's seen. Yeah. David, you kind of came up with what is basically the new ending while you were working on the project with Darren Aronofsky. Take it from there, and what were your endings before you realized this new possibility? Was the squid in your earlier drafts?
No.
Okay.
No, you have to understand, it takes a lot of setup to introduce an interdimensional space squid. It just does. That's not, you can't just say, oh, there it is, and look, there's my squid, and people are like, what? I was confused by the guy's penis. What the difference between the novel and the movie, and this is the real difference, is we don't have the appendices afterwards. And that squid, the whole thing with that storyline is all set up in the Wizard magazine and the stories about the comic book, and it's also set up in Tales from the Black Freighter to a certain extent. There's stuff about the secret island, these artists and all that stuff. That's all stuff that I would have to spend screen time explaining at the end of a movie where I've already spent 2 hours explaining a lot. Clearly the movie does not shy away from piling information on top of you as if you were the low Sherpa on the totem pole. But I felt that was going to come out of nowhere. Also, because I was writing so soon after 9/11, the images in the comic book, which I love, of the squid and just all these bodies, strewn about Times Square. In 1985, in a comic book, that's one thing. In 2002, to see live actors, smashed and covered in blood and littering the streets of New York, I felt was people ask me if the studio made me do that, and even me, I didn't feel like that was where I wanted to go.
Wait, just because you're on it right now, and we're going to get back to what you were talking about. For both of you guys, I was surprised by that omission as well. This is a movie that has butcher's knives, hacking apart serial killers. I mean, there's no shyness towards blood. So the fact that this huge destruction, killing 15 million people, there's not a body scene. I mean, this was my third time seeing the movie. Alex, anything you want to tell us about those end Warner Brothers conversations?
No,
or?
that was, I think Zach was really into, and it's there. There's some panels in the book that have shadows, like
the Hiroshima shadow.
Yeah, and that's sort of the image that Zach was drawn to, and it was consistent with Dr. Manhattan's power. So yeah, if there was a studio objection, I wasn't there for that.
It's just a strange omission because go on, David.
What I had wanted to do was take the Hiroshima shadows, and I thought, my ending, they didn't blow a big hole into the middle of New York. It was just this energy wave that blew everybody into nothingness, into dust, and they were all blown up against the walls as if they were, shadows, which is set up in the book. And I thought, you could sort of show the level of death in a sort of a beautiful, artistic way and see just these shadows blown up against the walls. And I also thought it was more fitting for Adrian's sort of corporate mindset that, well, we'll kill all the people, but we'll leave the infrastructure, we'll leave the buildings, and I'll still be able to go to my ATM and whatever.
But before you came to that, what was your ending in
the ending? So the ending before, what he did, well, it's lame in comparison, then I guess I'm just a big lame.
Anecdotally.
Well, what it was through Dr. Manhattan's breakthroughs that he had allowed to, the scientific breakthroughs that happened because of his existence, he was able to focus sunlight in a way that he could draw it down, and because he was so obsessed with Alexander, and Alexander felt he was the sun god, I thought that might be appropriate. But then eventually,
a golden eye, if you will. Sorry.
See, that's the problem. That has since come up, and I still have not seen that movie. So
really?
I'm kind of like, I guess I stole this thing from this thing I didn't see.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Ghost.
No. I mean, but no. It's been said before. Well, that was the ending of Goldeneye. I was like, oh, really? It looked horrible. I didn't go see it. I'm sorry, Goldeneye. I'm sure you're excellent.
All right. So I think it was Darren Aronofsky's friend, Ari Handel, who was the co-writer of The Fountain, who came up with this idea. I know you never found out who it was.
I don't know who the friend was.
I know. That was my guess. I repeat it's a guess. What was the idea that he emailed to Darren that then made its way back to you?
Well, he emailed it to... Yeah, I guess he emailed it to Darren. Darren forwarded it to us. And it was just, you should use Dr. Manhattan as the agent of destruction. And I was like, you're right. That's what it should be. And Paul Greengrass and I were working on... Adrian and Dr. Manhattan were working together to replicate his energy for the purposes of powering the world. This sort of infinite clean energy. So it just all fit together. And then I saw that and I said, okay, well, we'll put that with that, and then there we are.
It was a really smart choice because it used your resources that you've been building on for the previous 2 hours. You used Dr. Manhattan, which everybody understood.
Yeah, well, here's the other thing for anybody who's a screenwriter. You have to, for all of the infinite possibilities of film, I believe you have to be very circumspect about the number of magical things that happen in your movie. If you say, we're going to do a movie about people with mutant powers, well, that essentially comes down to there's evolution, there's the X gene. If you have that, you can develop some crazy power. That's fine. That sets you up for weather-changing powers or mental powers or beams from your eyes. But it's only one thing. And the problem with the squid was you had Dr. Manhattan, who was sort of your element of magic in the story, and then you had the squid, who came out of another dimension and could cast psychic waves of destruction. And that seemed like an extra bit of magic that sort of came in the end and needs a lot of setup to justify it. So it became obvious that if you use Dr. Manhattan, well, it's already set up, and he is the force of power, and he's the outside threat that has been throwing the whole world into chaos anyways, that has thrown off the whole history. So, in the end, it seemed to make sense.
And let me just add to that. Reading David's script for the first time objectively as a huge fan of the graphic novel, I thought it was brilliant. I mean, to me, other than also looking at it as a screenwriter, saying, "Dude, like you're not going to spend half an hour sort of setting up the interdimensional gastropod." You know what I'm saying?
I think it's a cephalopod.
Yeah, I think actually you're right.
Gastropod is a walking stomach. Cephalopod is a walking head. These are things you need to know as a writer.
I have no comment.
But
I don't mean to yell at you. I'm just saying.
Objectively speaking, if you look at the graphic novel and you look at the ending of the film, if you look at David's ending, the result is the same. Basically, the result is the same. Everyone that lives, everyone that dies. What's different? The result is the same. The mechanism is all that's different. And the mechanism, to me, fulfilled the criteria of what it would need to be to keep the theme of Watchmen intact, which is that the attack is bought from a third party. It's something that's mysterious and powerful, and Dr. Manhattan is all three of those things. So
it makes sense. It was good that it was a frame-up, which goes back to Vate. In the way that you pitched it to me, though, for the article, there was a beat that was then since removed from the film that I actually kind of liked. And in the comic book in Times Square, there's a film marquee that has, an advertisement for the day the Earth stood still. Right. And you almost did an homage to that in a sense in which, in your original draft, the way you explained it was Dr. Manhattan actually appears before the world in each of these places, makes a speech threatening them for stockpiling the nuclear weapons, and then delivers his punishment. Talk us through that, and then Alex, I'm curious how that part of it got lost. You actually you orated the speech over the phone with me, so I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah. He said what it was Adrian had set it up so that images of Dr. Manhattan would appear in Times Square, Hong Kong, Red Square, all over the world, wherever the cities were. And he basically said, people of the world, I am Dr. Manhattan. For years, I have watched you, slide into the chaos of self-destruction and so on and so forth, and you're heading towards nuclear destruction. This path ends now. Said any country that does not withdraw their weapons, that does not fall back from their borders, that does not begin to immediately dismantle their nuclear arsenals will suffer the same fate as the 9 cities. And he says, you're going to step back from your aggression or you will be destroyed. And from this minute on, I will be watching. And so that's what it was. And then he blows up and everybody dies. Because I still have a bit of an issue with the fact that that's not in there. I don't understand. What I didn't understand about the squid was, and of course they're going to kill me for this, the fans are going to kill me for this. What I didn't understand about the squid was, the dead squid shows up and causes this interdimensional rift. It's never explained. It's not like it's an invasion. It's just this thing that's come through space and time and arrived here and killed a bunch of people. So everybody stands back because they're going to what? What do you do in that situation? I'm work on squid repellent or something, or try to fix the dimensional rifts in the world. There's no
in the comic. At least it made everyone realize that there's something greater in the universe than their own petty problems.
Right, but the issue with that was that's what happened on 9/11, and we all know how that went. That lasted for 5 days, and of course somebody, I'm not going to mention any names, fucked it all up. So you know who I'm talking about. And so we were already living with the fact that that wasn't going to go that way. And so I thought you need the outside threat to be a threat and to dictate the terms and say, you stand down and dismantle your nuclear weapons. I'm going to take nuclear weapons out of the equation. Otherwise, I'm just going to wave my hand and destroy your cities. I still don't know why they back off because Dr. Manhattan has done this,
I would assume it would be the Nixon speech at the end, but Alex...
It is the Nixon speech at the end, but I don't know that...
You were there for that part of it. How did that get lost? I'm guessing The Day the Earth Stood Still was remade, not re-released. Remade earlier this year, or end of last year, so I'm guessing they didn't want those kind of elements in the movie because it would seem too close.
If that was... quite simply, Zach didn't want that. Zach... he didn't feel the speech was necessary. I think he thought that... Or his point was that once this happened, the world would kind of get it already, and that it might be scarier that there's this uncertainty about it. Do you know what I mean? That they don't know.
Fear of the unknown.
Yeah, that there's no terms. They know it's him. They can kind of infer certain things, but they're not sure either. And then I think maybe he was wondering how you would sort of explain how this Dr. Manhattan is recreated and talking and that kind of thing. But it's nothing against David or anything like that. That's just Zach didn't want it.
No. Yeah, but I felt that what history showed was you kill a bunch of people in a major metropolitan American city, and what'll happen is they'll go crazy and they'll start killing people all over the world. So I still don't. I still disagree with that. I watched the rough cut and I resent the copy of the thing with the whole speech and said, "Here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to shoot." And you can see they loved it.
I'll bet they love emails like that.
Yeah.
Another question, that's kind of come up with the Dr. Manhattan concept. He is an American invention, because as you move the story in this new direction, wouldn't it also be seen as America being a threat to the entire world in all these cities? I mean, I've watched some of the geek debates online, and they've kind of been traveling down this path, which I think is somewhat sensible, in which America would seem to almost be vulnerable for punishment based on...
You think that even after America itself was attacked?
Possibly. I mean,
I think that's negated by the fact that
True.
It's a blanket... I mean, look, if you had the speech, you'd understand it all. But what I've been doing is going around to theaters and just making the speech during that point in the movie. I'm like, everybody, okay, I'm the writer, let me, or co-writer.
His next 5 movies are with Zack Snyder.
That's right.
All right. Well, I mean, look, I love the shot of The Outer Limits playing on the TV because, as we all know, Alan Moore borrowed from the Outer Limits episode, The Architects of Fear, for that ending. So I thought that was a nice homage. Some really quick geeky questions. One of the things that I was actually surprised by was Dr. Manhattan kind of freaks out Ozymandias when he says nothing ever ends. And it's a quiet moment between the two of them in the graphic novel where he's kind of letting Ozymandias know his plan that just killed a lot of people might not actually work. In the film, it was transferred to a line that Laurie says, kind of in the coda. What was the thinking behind that?
God, you're so funny. A friend of mine who loved the movie, actually from in San Francisco, called me the other day and was like, well, why wasn't that line in the movie? I think the idea was that it may take some of the impact of Rorschach's journal at the end. That if sort of Dr. Manhattan's getting a jab at Adrian, and we're kind of, the audience is kind of feeling, oh, well, something bad might happen. It might take away, whether you agree with it or not, it might take away from the impact of what the journal is supposed to make you feel. Like, now he's not going to get away with it. If Dr. Manhattan says it, it's kind of like, oh, okay, especially coming from the all-powerful being, wow, Adrian might get his at the end. You know what I'm saying? So,
I saw some fan chatter that they were freaked out that Dan and Laurie weren't showing up in disguises at the end. I'm guessing because they would be wanted for cracking Rorschach out of prison.
Get off the internet.
Yeah, I know. So that was just like stupid, too late in the movie thing to add. That was why that was cut.
They never figured out who. Oh, they know who Laurie is. So
they know who Dan is. The police broke into his apartment.
Yeah, but not in the movie.
They did?
In this movie, the police kicked. Oh, no, only in the comic. Interesting. All right. Getting all the mythology crossed up in the
get
head.
your learn on.
All right. How about this? The death of Hollis Mason. When I interviewed
filmed.
Yeah, you said it was
every
in there.
cut until this one. In every cut.
I didn't even know it. Yeah, because in the rough cut I saw, he gets it, boy.
In every cut. And
it seems like you could almost see Night Owl turn at the bar to one of the gangsters, right?
Good, and there's no way I can't see him putting that in the director's cut, and it's pretty cool. I think that was just a certain point where the studio was like, dude, it's 2 hours and 40 minutes, or 2 hours and 45 minutes. You got to cut something. We need to get under that.
Another hugely geekly question that I just have to ask because I feel victim to it too. For years, we'd read this novel, but no one had really imagined what the voice of Dr. Manhattan would sound like. Some people were thrown off that there wasn't a sound treatment to it. I'm not saying to go as heavy as something like Darth Vader, but there seemed to be little or no sound treatment. Was that something that was ever experimented with? Just the sound of the voice.
That's a Zach question.
Okay.
I don't know. I never imagined it being kind of that crazy, but I don't know.
I didn't imagine it being crazy, but what I did want to do, there's a great bit, I think it's in Mighty Aphrodite, which is very similar to this film in many ways. Didn't an old man got beaten to death in that film, didn't they? I don't know.
Woody Allen as Rorschach would have been awesome.
Yeah, but Woody Allen. But in that movie, he's talking about movies, and he's saying, you have this movie, and there's like voiceover at the beginning, and then you never see it again. You can't just, you have to be consistent. You have to do the thing, and then at the end of the movie, suddenly there's this voiceover kicks in, and it's awesome and hilarious. I thought. Because that was the other thing, too, because the studios would say, well, if Rorschach's doing the voiceover, you can't have somebody else doing the voiceover. And I was like, do you never get out of filmmaking 101? Like, if you ever think about breaking these rules? And I thought you start out with Rorschach as the sort of Chandler-esque, hard-boiled dialogue, and it's, Rorschach's journal, and he's talking the way he's talking. And then, no, wait, that's Nick. And then I thought, we'll go to Mars, and you'll see Dr. Manhattan walking, and suddenly you'll hear, there's a photograph in my hand, and it comes out of every speaker. I didn't think about, like, putting stuff on it, but just making it so clear and so present.
So I think it would have been cool with auto-tune, with T-Pain doing Dr. Manhattan's voice.
There's a photograph in my hand.
Not exactly the sound treatment I was thinking. Snow speeders, Alex. There were no snow speeders. A lot of people. Yeah, it was cash, right? Same with the dome.
Cash.
The snow coming in over the dead scientists. Cash.
I did a owl ship action sequence where they're being, they go through subway tunnels and, and all that stuff. And when they were, and then Zach was like, that's cool, but. The budget's like on,
Were they ever using the screechers of the owl, the sound device on the prison break?
That was also, even up to in my version, originated from David's into I kept it.
That's just from the book.
Yeah, because Archie, the ship uses.
No, but I'm saying
screechers.
he kept it, and I kept it, and I don't know if that was just an aesthetic choice on Zach's part or whatever the deal was.
What was the toughest scene for each of you guys to write? The one that was just literally kept you up at night, you kept coming back to again and again. You really wanted to polish the hell out of it.
This doesn't have any of those. This isn't like...
Really?
Yeah, in X-Men, and this is usually how it is. In X-Men, there's the first scene where Wolverine goes in and talks to Patrick Stewart, and he tells them who all the X-Men are and sets up the whole thing. That scene was rewritten 1,000 times. God knows how many. Just again and again and again and again and again. The scenes are so good. It's not a matter. You're not polishing Alan Moore's work. You're just in awe of how it came together. I don't say that about everything he's ever done, but this work is so incredible that I never found anything lacking. That I
had
felt
one.
I needed.
I'm not saying there was something lacking in Alan Moore's work. I'm just saying something tough for you to write. Alex, what was tough for you?
Which ended up being non-factor anyway because they just went back to the graphic novel at the end. Whether it's sacrilege or not, I don't think so. But I always had a problem with. Adrian is the smartest man in the world.
I know where you're going.
And Dan figures out how to get in his computer in like 2 seconds. You know what I'm saying? And and I wrote a bunch of scenes to try and set that up. So I had a stupid idea. That in the beginning in earlier drafts that we didn't use, and then I did other things.
I did some of this stuff too.
Yeah. You try to set that up, and at the end, I just think it was a practical reason. I think that they couldn't film some of the stuff, because even in some of the stuff in the investigation, like, I wrote a scene with Rorschach in the guy Roy Chess's apartment. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, okay, they weren't going to film that. You know what I'm saying? So it was a lot of stuff like that where I think it was a practical reason. But that was the toughest one because I'm like, he's the smartest man in the world. They just can't walk up in there and just be like, Rams is this too, and then it's all you know what I mean? So
I had things where I had like in the scenes between Dan and Adrian beforehand that Adrian said something. It's like comes up with some sort of anecdote about Alexander and then which leads to Ramses and I was sort of trying to set it up in that way. But in the end, I mean, it's kind of a throwback to the '80s where. Yeah, you can be the smartest man in the world, but your computer system's still an Atari 64. There's no getting around that.
At least it wasn't Ozymandias' birthday.
Yeah, that's right.
What do you miss? How about that as fanboys? What was the one thing there was just no way to ever get it on the screen, and it's a nice moment that you wish there was a way?
Hollis Mason.
Hollis
but
Mason,
he filmed it. You know what I'm saying? But
so
he filmed
director's cut. We might see that.
And then David wrote a scene that would have been nice with the Dan on the subway that I had always kept. Yeah,
I remember. What was it?
Because it just, in the end, I know why they cut it. It's just a quick scene of showing his impotence. When he run into the knot tops and
the gang, the knot tops,
and then like they kind of like sort of bully him, and he doesn't do shit. You know what I mean? And it's like, right. That was kind of cool, and that would be cool to keep that in the movie. But just little things, really. Nothing big, except I do miss Hollis. I do miss.
You've seen it. I mean, it's in there. It'll be in the director's cut.
And I do miss. David wrote more scenes, and I wrote more scenes with Laurie. When Dr. Manhattan leaves, like she's an asset to the government. So there's this whole thing with her and like Secret Service agents trying to.
That got cut too.
I don't think they ever filmed that. I just think that was because that was in every version of the script I worked on, and I think they just started cutting.
What, he and the she and the Secret Service agents?
So there was chase. There was a chase scene, and then I did an escape scene with her. Where she escaped, I
saw it. I saw it on the dailies when I went up to Vancouver.
Really?
Yeah. So they did shoot it.
Okay.
And she tells the guy, well, I just have to go to the bathroom. She turns around and just
whips his ass. Yeah.
Beats the hell out of him and takes off.
Oh, okay. Well.
Yeah. No, it's shot.
Wow.
Did you ever have Night Owl kind of take vengeance on some of the knot tops in that same bar scene?
That's filmed.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so that was filmed as well.
It was in every version
just
until this one. Yeah, it was in every version until this one.
I can't believe they cut that. That's so short sounding. I mean,
no, but then
3 minutes.
No, but then you have to set that up.
You have to kill Hollis. They already fought.
Yeah, but there's a whole sequence where he does it sepia tone. It's not like a really fast scene. Then there was another scene which I don't know if he filmed where it explains why the knot tops would even want to kill him.
Right.
So that's three. So that's kind of like three scenes, which would probably add up to at least 5 minutes, which would have brought it to 2:45.
I have to say,
now you're riling us up. Now we're like, damn,
yeah. Well, I do miss the. I agree with your friend yelling at you, and we'll talk after. I do miss Dan, seeing what happens to Rorschach and just being so bereft and lost, and Laurie sort of wandering through. Actually, I had her. I had her go into a room, and she walks into the room, and all the lights in Adrian's place just come on when you walk into a room. And one of the room, and I was setting up that she was an alcoholic, like her mother. Not quite to the same extent, but she walks into a room and the lights come up and it's just all champagne. And she's just said, I'm a sucker for good champagne. And it's just all this incredible champagne, walls and walls of it. So she just cracks it open and starts getting hammered. And
luckily it wasn't the same champagne the scientist got her. She'd be dead.
Yeah, well, exactly. So then Dan comes back and he's upset and she's hammered. And then it's intercourse is the word, down by the pool. And then there is, I'm sorry,
which is just like
I don't mean to get all, the blue
extent.
language. And then you look up, you pan up, and you see Dr. Manhattan standing over them, and he sort of accepts it and walks off across the pool. And I was like, and then he goes up and tells Adrian, nothing ever ends, So I do sort of miss that, just that progression of events in the book. I think it's really beautiful.
We're going to take questions from the crowd. You, sir, right there. Did you guys ever talk to Alan Moore at any point?
I did, yeah. I got Alan's phone number from a journalist or something and called him up and said, hey, you don't know me, but I'm adapting your masterpiece, and I just wanted to say, thank you. Just wanted to say what a huge fan I am, and to let you know, I know you have a certain antipathy towards Hollywood, which I sympathize with, but to any extent you want to be involved, to whatever extent you want to dictate what is or is not in the film, I want to give you that opportunity. And he said, oh no, David, the book was my Watchmen and the movie is your Watchmen, and if there's anything I can do to help, you call me anytime. And then I talked to him. I called him a few times. I asked him what a gluino was, and I asked him what the bestiary was, and he'd just go off about all these things, and it was really, really great. And he was so nice to me and so supportive of me as an artist, despite his hatred towards Hollywood. And then one day I figured out how to do a sequel to the movie. I came up with all these ideas, just sort of broke open. I said, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this. I was so excited. I called Alan, and he has not spoken to me since. True story.
Did you ever send him your script?
The script, yeah.
So
he read. I sent him the script, I think, before I sent it to Universal.
So what were his comments on your script?
He went out he did an interview with Empire magazine, and he said this is the closest it will ever come to being adapted properly, and that said, I shan't be seeing the movie. And that gave me a huge amount of legitimacy with the fans, and was really, really special, given the fact that Hollywood doesn't exist as far as he's concerned. And I get it, I get it. But he was always exceptionally nice to me, and as a fan, it was just amazing to talk about Dr. Manhattan with Alan Moore. Is a very special and frightening experience.
Next question. No, you didn't miss it. Question was in regards to why was Alan Moore's name not on the credits?
He doesn't want to have credit on anything he does. He gives his portion of the profits to his co-creators. He did that for V. He did that here. He gave it to Dave Gibbons.
He refuses to do it because, well, the argument I've heard from him is, why do you need to spend the gross domestic product of Chile to bring a movie to the screen? It seems asinine, and it's hard to argue with that. Plus, there's the sort of the artist's feeling that you don't want to see your work ruined, and he has seen it happen before, and there comes to a point where you say, especially if you're a comic book writer, the biggest comic book writer in the world, which he may be, that means nothing to Hollywood. It means nothing to Hollywood. And in his world, he's the top of his game. So I can't speak for the inside of the man's head, but it sort of seems to me that if that's his world and he says, this is my world and that's your world and I hate your world, then he has the right to do that.
Another question. Talk about having the Rorschach Journal kind of suddenly show up at the end. It was set up. It happened that way in the comic. It shows.
Yeah,
he was talking about the impact.
Again, that was we had done some more scenes to set that up so that it would increase the impact of that. Again, that's editing. I don't know.
What were the extra scenes that would increase the impact?
Like you
What's
saw
in the book, right?
Like, there's some stuff in the book where there was an interview with the New Frontiersman as a paper was.
Oh, you mean to set up the New Frontiersman? Okay,
yeah, so
right.
and you saw Seymour. You kind of get a glimpse of him earlier in the movie, but he actually had lines.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Got it.
Yeah, I think that is the issue there, and it will probably all be there in the director's cut, where you kind of need to set up the New Frontiersman beforehand. You need to see Seymour and the guy, because you're going, who are these people, and how do we get here, and why is that guy wearing the smiley face shirt? And it just sort of comes out of nowhere. And I think to really have the impact, you need the setup of Rorschach. Well, you need two things. You need Rorschach to have had copies of the New Frontiersman around and to know that he was a fan. And then you need to see that series of moments where they're going off. He's dropping off the journal into the mail and saying, you have always stuck by me, and I've always, believed in you, and so this is for you guys. And then you see where it goes, and then you see them put it on the crank file. And in the book, that's so heartbreaking. It's just like everything he's gone through, everything he's put in, you think it's lost. And then you come back to it at the end and you realize, no, it's going to expose everything. I think without the setup, it does lose a bit of its impact. But like I say, I mean, it'll probably all...
It also pays off the concept of nothing ever ends, even if they don't know everything.
Totally. I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah, it would start people on the trail towards Vade, at least for the murders, and they would be able to figure out the rest.
And the other great thing is Rorschach, in the end, defeats the bad guy, and that's what's cool.
I mean, we've sat here and talked. I mean, I guess I've talked a lot about Zach, having a lot of leverage and getting his way like that. But that's doesn't discount the fact that he still had tremendous battles to fight.
Yeah.
And a lot of decisions that I think maybe some people are talking about. Really, it just boiled down to economics, and it boiled down to he was under a tremendous amount of pressure to trim down the movie. And the bottom line is, you're just fighting. You're just trying to protect what you can protect. That's not an excuse, but that's just the reality. Look, right now the movie's 2 hours and 40 minutes. So.
Yeah, I would say I like the Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings to me is the director's cut 4-hour-long pieces. The other ones were just, those are the concessions you have to make to fit a film into the theaters at all. So I don't even really, I mean, this gives you a taste of what it's going to be, but someday, soon, you're going to have a full Watchmen with Tales from the Black Freighter, with Hollis Mason getting killed, with all these incredible things, and it's different. It's sort of unfair to Zach to say, oh, well, that should have been set up more, or this should have been set up more, because God knows how much was shot and cut, and how much you will still get as a fan, as an audience member down the road.
You, sir, right there. What are your future projects, and what about Metal Gear franchise going to the screen for David?
I'm working on a movie called Lost Planet right now for Warner Brothers, a video game adaptation, very cool sort of world, big action movie. I have a couple of things. I'm starting a company and sort of developing franchises, and there's a few things I'm going to announce in the next week or two. And as far as Metal Gear goes, for those of you who don't know, I do the voice of this very popular video game character. It's sort of my side job, but people know me for that a lot more than they do for any silly writing that I might have done in the past. And there's going to be a movie of it. I can't say because there isn't really anything. I said something in an interview saying, oh, well, there might be new conversations, and there are, but nothing is concrete and nothing is anything in this town until it's something. So all I can say is I do have a take for the movie. I would love to do it. And the only reason I'm not already doing it was sort of Hollywood politics, and hopefully that'll all get worked out. And if it doesn't, well, that's a shame, but if it does, then I'll be thrilled to do it.
Alex, your next project, you're going to work with Zach again, I think.
Yeah, at this point, I've completed work on an adaptation of a book of short stories by Ray Bradbury called The Illustrated Man. Zach's next movie will be Sucker Punch, and the idea with Illustrated Man was always from the beginning that it would be an anthology, that Zach would direct one, and he'd get a bunch of other directors to direct some of the other shorts. That may change now because I think he's, that's part of the debate whether he's going to direct the whole thing or if it's still going to be an anthology.
Anthologies are always tough because, studio execs especially argue that audiences, they don't like a whole bunch of unconnected stories back to back.
That was a challenge.
Yeah. So, have you guys been dealing with that, or is it still going to?
No, they loved it. Well, because it's not. I tied them all together.
Okay.
Right. So they're all related, and because that was the thing, we're going to do just a straight anthology and just show basically a bunch of short films, but that's not what we did here. So I'm kind of done with that until they decide what they want to do.
Do you want to give us any clue how you tied it together?
Not right now.
All right. Very good. Another time.
But I'm also doing a movie with Michael Mann and De Niro called The Winter of Frankie Machine. And
called the what? The
Winter of Frankie Machine. So far, that's going well. And then,
are you able to tell us the concept or anything about it?
Yeah, it's based off a novel that neither one of us has read. Okay.
You read it? Who's it by?
Don
Winslow.
Yeah.
All right.
There was a faithful version of it, and when they approached Michael to do it, Michael just said, "Okay, well, that's not the version I want to do. I like the premise. If you still want me to do it, then this is what we're going to do." And they agreed to it. So it's just basically like De Niro plays his age, and he's retired, and he's someone comes out of the blue and tries to kill him, and he has to figure out why, because he's you find out he was an old mob guy, but
was it Ozymandias? No,
no,
oh, sorry,
no. And then I've
Guys everywhere.
and the last thing is I've got a project called Ninja Scroll, which I think is going. I think it's going okay. Yeah.
All right. Two other questions from earlier. One was about Ozymandias. There's been a lot of debate about kind of the portrayal, kind of having the Germanic tinge to him, along with kind of the aloofness of his character, which some you could argue was from the comic. What was you guys' perspective on that?
Well, it's a
tough character to bring to the screen.
Well, I just came to it as an audience member. I didn't know Matthew Good, and I saw I'd seen some dailies in Vancouver, and then I saw the first rough cut about five or 6 months ago. And is that how long ago that was?
Probably. Yeah.
I don't know. Doesn't matter. The point is, the first time through, I started watching it, and I thought, I don't know about this guy. Is he too aloof? Is it too fey? Is it too whatever? There's something about it that's like biting on tinfoil, and then in the end, I got it. It all came together. I was like, yeah, Adrian is like that. He's not a particularly likable character. He does have this colossal ego, and he is masking who he is through his sort of superfluous demeanor. And so while I was, sort of worried about it the first time through, being, part of the film, the second time through, I just went with it, and I love it. I think it's great. So this is the issue with this movie, is that anybody who's read the comic book since 1986, has run the movie in their head 1,000 times, and for me, it's 1,000,000 times. So you have to, at certain times, step back from the movie you have had in your head all that time and look at the movie that's there.
I agree. It's just like hearing the voice of Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah, exactly.
Alex, what were some of the discussions you and Zach had about, that character and how to kind of bring it to life?
Well, first of all, I was. Well, I guess this relates. I was. That was a choice between that Zach and. In terms of the Germanic accent that Zach and Matthew Good, who I think is a fantastic actor,
he is.
Talked about. I think we just talked about maybe making him more gay, because we even said we were just trying to find a way to work in the line, possible homosexual must investigate, and we just couldn't work it.
From Rorschach,
yeah, we just couldn't work it out. But we kept talking about we got to put that in the movie somewhere, and we just couldn't find a place. Because the main thing is that in the movie, in order to kind of expand how they're friends and the connectivity of it, in the graphic novel, it's Rorschach who comes to Adrian. In this version, it's Dan, right. And so we just didn't have the opportunity to put that in. But yeah,
you know why it's Dan?
Dave, what were you saying?
You know why it's Dan? I'll tell you why it's Dan, because it's Rorschach in the book. And Rorschach goes and he makes fun of Adrian and calls him a prostitute and then goes out the window. And you see there's a shot of Adrian looking down, saying, "Have a nice day," with the hook from the grappling hook on the window. And I'm like, why didn't he go, doink, and solve his problem?
Just kill Rorschach right then and there?
He's the smartest man in the world. Like, oh, Rorschach's on to me. Why don't I just kill him now? And no one will care because I'm Adrian and he's a filthy nobody. So that's why I had initially. Plus, I wanted Dan to have a relationship with Adrian, and so that's where that came from. But I will say, and this is the reason you need to watch this movie 4,000 times, and preferably next weekend. On one of my favorite parts of the movie, and I don't even know if it's still in there. I saw it on the rough cut. When he's looking at the screen, Dan's looking at the screen, you see Adrian's folders, and one of them just says, "Boys." Yeah. I was like, fantastic. That's tremendous.
Yeah, so that would be the only thing that Zach and I talked about would be the homosexuality of Adrian. That's the only thing we talked about.
The Lee Iacocca scene, that was definitely something new. Talk about the creation of that.
God, that's a blurry thing. Zach said in an interview I did that, and I don't know. At a certain point you work on the script and it gets so blurry. I mean, I remember trying to be Alan Moorish, and I know for sure I did the McLaughlin Group, and I put other characters that didn't make the film. Like there was the guy who at the time was the head of the UN, who. No, it was another guy who I'd found this article from like 1985 or something like that, where he was saying, we'll never have a nuclear. He was visiting Hiroshima, and he was like, we're never going to have a nuclear war. And it was like, wow, okay, I got to put that guy, that guy in the movie, and I put dictator Pinochet from Chile. Stuff like that. I really don't. I think I thought Zach did it, and I don't just. You just work on it so much, and I remember it being there, but I don't recall. It was just all about. We needed to do something hinged on the energy. We had to keep kind of playing that in a sort of indirect way.
A few more questions from the crowd. Right there, you sir in the middle. There was a moment from the original rape scene where Hooded Justice is beating the comedian. The comedian says, "But you wanted me to." Was that ever in the script or cut from the film?
That's just the economics of page count. There.
Okay.
Yeah.
You sir, right there in the middle in the hat.
That you mean he appeared more triumphant, right?
Right. In the comic, he was more triumphant. On the screen, he was battered. It's almost like he lets himself get a beating. Like the jokey character that they're talking about at dinner, the guy that just is okay to take a beating for a while.
Yeah, look.
So with Vate, talk about that as less of a heroic ending for him.
And then the stuff that I had previously worked on with Zach, that it was definitely kind of more on that end. In fact, there was kind of more stuff going on in the television screen. I think I don't know your version. I think in my version, I definitely had him crying, like in the book. Zach made certain choices, and I don't have a real problem with it.
No, me neither.
Yeah.
Me neither.
In my version, I had Dan sleep with Lori and then wake up in the middle of the night, and he is so racked with horror over what's happened to his friend Rorschach that he can't live with it. And he realizes Rorschach's right, that justice has to be punished no matter what the outcome. And he goes up to Adrian and he says, look, as long as people don't find out that you did it, the threat remains and everything will be fine. But that doesn't mean I can't kill you for it. That doesn't mean you don't deserve to die for it. So I sent him up to, knowing he couldn't beat Adrian, but just having to kill him anyway. Just knowing that in the face of, evil, you don't compromise, and that's what he's picked up from Rorschach. So
wait, what happened?
Well, what he does is they get into a big fight, and of course Adrian is just dismantling him, and you see Dan sort of fall, and he's going to die. Adrian's just like, I'm sorry, Dan, I thought you were going to make it through this, but I guess not. And he goes up to kill him, and you see that he rolls him over, and Dan's got the remote for Archie, and you see this light come through the thing, and he just brings the ship right into the bedroom and crushes Adrian, and himself, really, but he manages to, survive it, whereas Adrian is crushed. And so then they go back, and that's where that scene between Dan and Lori comes from, where she says, do you think we'll be all right? And Dan says, well, as long as they think Dr. Manhattan's still watching, we'll be all right. And then the book undoes all that, but that's sort of where all that came from. And I believe that my Dan-Adrian fight remained, but then Zach and Alex turned it into he allows himself to get beat because it's a horrible thing he's done, and he knows Dan's got to get it out, and he knows he deserves it, and which I think is really sick and wonderful as well.
Yeah, it worked for me.
Yeah, I think it's cool.
You, ma'am, got to get a question in from a lady. Was there more, obviously, from the psychiatrist talking to Rorschach? Was there more on the page from those scenes, and of course his home life falling apart, as we know from the comic as well?
Not home life. There was just little bits and pieces. I think in your version, you also had him leaving, saying how he couldn't help Rorschach. Or did you?
I don't remember.
It gets so blurry. But there was a scene. I don't know. He might have wrote it. I might have wrote it. I don't know. But there was a little bit more. Just a little bit.
I can't help him. That sort of
thing.
If that's in the book, then I had it in the.
But not his home life.
Drafts. I never had his home life because just. He's talking to us. All he does in the book is he really sort of brings that horror home, tells the story again, and so it didn't. that was something that I was willing to cut. But anything that is in the book, I put on the page. And
in that flashback, I've seen people debate why he didn't give the guy a hacksaw like in the comic and then light him on
There was
fire.
a movie called Saw.
Was that really why? Because of Saw?
I don't know.
All right.
David wrote that scene.
I think the issue is
Because he just to explain for our listeners around the world, like he gives the guy a hacksaw, he's handcuffed,
Yeah.
and he says, you could try and cut
he lights
your-
the building on fire.
Yeah, he lights the guy in the building on fire. He says you could try and cut your way through, but you won't make it in time.
Yeah, that's tempered steel. It's going to take you 10 minutes to cut through. It'll take you 2 minutes to cut through your wrist.
And Rorschach stands outside.
And he stands outside waiting for him. He's going to kill him anyway. My issue was that it's out of Mad Max. I mean, it's out of Mad Max. Right. If anybody's seen the first Mad Max, he handcuffs him to the car and gives him a hacksaw and says, I don't know how long you got before that car blows up, but I'd cut my hand off to get out.
Oh, and David wrote a great line for that scene too, which I love.
Thank you.
So,
What was the line?
Well, I had, for another movie that was never going to get made, I had written a line, men get arrested and dogs get put down. And that was a really cool line in a not a great script. And then when I was doing that sequence and I didn't want to do the Mad Max hacksaw thing. I wanted to do something else. I thought, and plus he's got the moment where he becomes Rorschach in the book is he hits the dog with the thing, and the blood splashes his chest. Warm blood splashed my chest. It was Walter Kovacs who shut his eyes and said, "Mother." It was Rorschach who opened them again. And I thought, well, it should be when the whole point of the story is I was soft on criminals then, too soft. I let them live. So the big moment is not when he kills the dog. The big moment is when he kills the guy, when he just says, you know what, hell with this. Hits him with the thing. So I thought, well, it's a really appropriate thing because he's just got the dogs and there's dogs and all this stuff and it sort of represents the shifting of his mentality at that moment.
This is a violent comic. This is an existential comic. I got to say, you guys have been very generous with your times tonight. Hats off for such a reverence that you showed in this adaptation. Give it up again for Alex and for David.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. You still have your hat on.
Hats off.
Okay.
And that's how the Q&A went down. Very special thanks again to our Q&A Endurance Challenge participants, Watchmen screenwriters, David Hayter and Alex Say.
If you dug this episode of the podcast in general, consider tossing a virtual tip into our PayPal virtual tip jar by visiting www.creativescreenwritingmagazine.blogspot.com and look for the PayPal icon. Your tips are appreciated and definitely help out with equipment, hard drives, and all the other stuff we need to keep this podcast running. Of course, feel free to check out my blog, which I even managed to update on the rare occasion that I have time to do so by visiting www.jeffgoldsmith.blogspot.com. You can also always feel free to drop me a line by emailing me at yo.goldsmith@gmail.com, and I'll do my darndest to get back to you as soon as I can. Of course, don't forget to click that subscribe button in iTunes or your podcatching software because that's how episodes are downloaded automatically every time you click refresh. And if you have a minute, feel free to leave us positive feedback in the iTunes Music Store or at podcastalley.com. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, Senior Editor for Creative Screenwriting Magazine, thanking you again for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.